when I set out to try to isolate a very important stress hormone, which we now call corticotropin releasing factor, or now releasing hormone, it's the substance that is in the anterior pituitary that causes the whole series of reactions that ultimately lead to our response to stress through the adrenal and the release of cortisol. So what happened was that we were starting by trying to isolate it from several hundred hypothalami, and eventually this hormone was isolated by other people from 200,000 hypothalami. That was in the days of brute force biochemistry, when you tried to isolate a substance directly, unlike now with molecular biology, where you can find what the DNA sequence is and work backwards to synthesize the protein and test it that way with the peptide. So, fortunately, in the course of trying to isolate this stress hormone, we were using anesthetized rats, and a portion of the material we were separating caused a huge welling up of saliva in the mouths of the rats. A very odd phenomenon, and that led to the isolation of a very different hormone, which has the generic term of substance P, and it also led to the detection of another hormone, which subsequent graduates were able to isolate, called neurotensin. So we called it the spit factor and the purple factor when we first were realizing that they might be additional hormones. So I've had that wonderful experience once later on, also in my research, again when nature is trying to tell you something different from the wisdom you think you're bringing to the study.
Mm-hmm. And that's maybe where your P, you're perceiving that's kind of flexible, helps in your research to not be too frustrated.
Yes.
I think it would be interesting for readers and listeners to know what the difficult times in your life have been and how you coped as a smart person. What helped you get through difficult times?
I thought of that question that you were going to ask me, and I'd like to talk about it in not a huge, large, traumatic sense of challenges, but the challenge that we continue to face of language. I've always loved words. I can remember the first pun I ever heard that started me on the rocky road to loving language. And I have friends who hear music in their heads all the time, and I hear the sound of words a lot of my waking hours. And so how do you take concepts that have a lot of baggage and introduce them to people who are very turned off by that very baggage, and yet the concept needs to be taught if only for figuring out how we can get beyond it and how we can create better, more appropriate concepts. So that's too general. Let's get specific. One of my biggest challenges when I switched careers from neurobiology research to acupuncture research was teaching research courses to acupuncture students who really equated research with randomized controlled trials, which was the whole paradigm that they knew, and I think correctly in some ways, was very difficult to apply to almost any other area besides drug studies. But people have been trying to do that. And the idea of teaching research to acupuncture students was very off-putting for them until I began to reframe research as ways of knowing. And the kind of research that's found in scientific journals is one way of knowing. And obviously, in something like acupuncture, there are large numbers of classical acupuncture texts. There there are modern texts, there's clinical experience, and framing it within ways of knowing also allowed us to begin a wonderful discussion of intuition as a way of knowing.
Discussion of what? I'm sorry.
Intuition.
Intuition.
Yeah, as another way of knowing. And that was very appealing to them, and that framing research as clinical research as one way of knowing was a big help. I'm also looking to words as challenges. How do we get new concepts? And when I was involved with first the Office of Alternative Medicine at the NIH, and later the National Center for NCAM, National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, which now has yet a new name, where they've taken away the medicine and used the term health, which I appreciate. But there were a lot of problems in getting grants for certain areas, but not other areas. So, what's an example? You could never get a grant to study miracles, but you could get a grant to study spontaneous remission.
To study what? Pardon?
Spontaneous remission. If you reframed miracles as spontaneous remission, then it was possible to get a grant. You couldn't get a grant to study psychics, but you could get a grant to study medical intuitives. Again, just by reframing it. And so, in my current interest, instead of using the term aura, which has a lot of New Age baggage, we're using the term biofield, and we'll get to talk about what biofields are, I hope, later.
Yes.
But that's a challenge I love, is how to gain new perspectives on important concepts by using different words for basically the same thing. How that can expand our understanding and interest and curiosity.
You had a personal difficulty when you had severe sciatic pain. You had to have friends carry you back in the house, and that's what introduced you to acupuncture.
Indeed. I was starting to learn Tai Chi Chuan in the days when I was still a straight ahead bench level neurobiology researcher. And one morning, I got this pain when I was doing one of the kicks. It's not a heavy duty kick because Tai Chi Chuan is a kind of internal martial art, but there are still soft ways that one moves the foot in a kick. And I got this pain radiating down my leg, and I thought I'd simply better have to slow up the next time it came around. And when it came around again, the pain just radiated all the way down my leg, and that's when I had to call friends to carry me back to my house. And I knew the irony was that one of the main preparations I was studying in neurobiology was the sciatic nerve in frogs in particular. And I knew this was the revenge of the bullfrog. But what happened was, in my Tai Chi studio, the master would assign one of the advanced students to each of us new people. And this student called me up and she said, "Where have you been? You know, you were doing really well." And I told her what had happened. And she laughed and she said, "Okay, Mr. Western Scientist, it's time for acupuncture, because clearly I have been to a neurologist and even to an orthopedic surgeon. In those days, x-rays were the only medical imaging available. And they said, 'Good news, there's nothing wrong with your spine.' And I gritted my teeth and said, 'Yeah, well, what do I do about the pain?' And they said, 'Soft tissue problem doesn't show up on the x-rays. What would you like us to prescribe?' And I said, 'I don't want to prescribe anything. I want to know what the problem is.' And they said, 'Well, sorry, we can't help you.' And then a few days later was when this Tai Chi Chuan student called me, and she came over and literally drove me to her acupuncturist. And he had recently come over from Taiwan. This is the late 70s, so there wasn't a lot of above-board choices. This was in the Santa Monica area, where you were. In any case, I walked in, and there was this elderly Chinese gentleman sitting in the living room watching Sesame Street. Later, as I got to know him, and I asked him about this, he laughed and said that was really important for him to learn English. But in any case, I had my first treatment, and I was amazed at I was probably 75 or 80% cured of my pain after that one treatment, because they know when sciatica is not fortunately due to a slip disc pressing on that those spinal roots and leading to the pain in the nerve. When that's not the case, most often it's due to a buttocks muscle spasm that's pressing on that nerve and giving you radiating pain, and they know where to put the needles to make those muscles relax. And then in those days, it was only the raw herbs, so I had to take the raw herbs to rebalance the underlying problem, so that when I was stressed, I wouldn't get this triggering pain again from the buttock muscle spasm. So I was a research scientist. I took my herbs into my lab, and those many listeners will know what a fume hood is. It's a very heavy-duty piece of glass that you pull down over a hood which has an exhaust. So when you're distilling chemicals with noxious smells, they're not going to come into your laboratory. So this is where I brewed my herbs, much to I got a lot. Let's just say I got a lot of flack from my medical and research colleagues as to what I was doing. But it was fascinating, because maybe third or fourth day into taking those herbs, I had an experience where I had a rush of energy through my body, which the kind of experience I've never had since. But when I talked to acupuncturists about it, they smiled and said, yes, this was really a very good sign, and it got rid of the last amounts of pain in my body. It was a fascinating introduction to me about acupuncture. And then it wasn't, this was the late 70s, of course, and that's when the endorphins were first discovered. And here I go with my Gemini nature. I saw very soon after the discovery one paper from Beijing and another research paper from the University of Toronto, and in both cases they were animal studies for the first time showing the link between acupuncture and the endorphins, that acupuncture analgesia, in fact, might be explained on the basis of the release of these endogenous opioid-like substances.
Is it because the needles create a little bit of pain? Is it the needling that triggers the endorphins?
Well, this is a key question in acupuncture research. People jump to saying, "Oh, now we know the mechanism of acupuncture," and we don't at all. We know that when you put a needle into a certain point, certain changes occur in the body, like these endorphins are released, or substances in the immune system are released. But we still know virtually nothing about what happens between when we put the needle in, where the needle is put, and what these changes in physiology are. So people use the term mechanism when they should be using correlation. And this is a real problem that we face in research in general, especially when we get into areas of so-called energy medicine. Again, there's correlations. We don't know what consciousness is. There are correlations between different states of awareness and functional MRI, for example, photography that gives us this wonderful insight into what's happening at the same time when we're in different states of consciousness. But these are just correlations. We still don't know what so-called mechanisms are in acupuncture. What are the successive changes that happen to get a signal from the surface of the body to the interior?
There's been lots of studies including functional MRIs, where people trigger sham points and they don't get the same results as if they trigger the acupressure or acupuncture points.
Yes, I mean this is the fascination because we don't really know what it means to use sham, so-called sham acupuncture in clinical trials, because you can't really create a sham if you don't know how the real treatment is working. So until there are literally dozens of different kinds of, quote, sham acupuncture procedures that are used, some of which involve needling at inappropriate places, some involve needling at so-called incorrect acupuncture points. There are also, quote, sham acupuncture procedures that are similar to the kind of stage daggers that are used in operas, where it looks like the sword is entering the body, but all it is retracting into the shaft of the sword. So micro stage daggers have been developed for acupuncture. But they all have their problems, and they all get us away in many ways from the way acupuncture is delivered in clinical practice. We're sort of distorting clinical practice for the sake of research, and we have to be very careful about that. So we can talk a lot about this, but the main problem, I'll just say again, is you can't create an acceptable, a believable, an appropriate sham if you don't know how the real treatment is working. With a drug, you know how it's absorbed and how it's metabolized and what the receptor is and how it's broken down, and so that you can create a placebo that doesn't do any of these things. And that's only a placebo in terms of mimicking the physical aspects of what the drug is doing. And of course, now there's so much fascinating research on the other aspects of placebo, that there is a real physiology of intention and attention and desire to please. And all of these aspects of the placebo response we're finding have actual physiological correlations again.
I've had Harry Oldfield took a photograph of me just wearing my underwear, and you could see the meridian lines, some of them like little red lines up my legs and down my arms. What do we know scientifically about the existence of meridians?
The most interesting thing I believe that we're beginning to know is that we talked at the beginning about other systems besides the nervous system, the immune system, the endocrine system, the circulatory system, and another emerging system has to do with the fascia. That we say is a fascinating new system in the body, but
so the fascia or the connective tissue, right?
It's the superficial connective tissue, and that's a whole body system. And what we know about physiology is whole body systems don't evolve for limited purposes. Almost all whole body systems, like the circulatory system and the nervous system, have evolved to carry some form of information. And the really exciting development is that this fascial system, which is right beneath the skin, so it's in a perfect location to be an interface between the outside and the inside world. It's in a perfect location to be an information receiving, sorting, carrying system. And the fascia, as we know, is in large part made up of collagen fibers, which are basically a triple helix. And there's some preliminary evidence to suggest that this triple helix can bind water in a way that allows protons, hydrogen ions, to zip along the surface. This is work, old work now by Maywan Ho, who's now retired, biophysicist at the Open University in London. So people have speculated that this connective tissue system, this fascia, may be a signaling system, and because it's not only an extracellular system, but because it can link up to tissues and even cells through cell biology mechanisms that are well known. There are docking proteins that link the collagen fibers to the surface of cells, for example, so that any kind of signal can go not only along the surface of the collagen fibers, but through the docking proteins, through the extracellular regions of the integrins, these transmembrane proteins that are present in virtually every cell type of the body. Such a putative signal can get inside the cell where it can then hop along, be transferred along the intracellular matrices, and from there get right into the nucleus and affect the DNA. So we have an amazing possible new system in the body that can carry information and can link up many different parts of the body.
So, is it possible that the meridians, the energy channels, flow through those connective tissues?
Well, that is the really exciting implication of some of the research done by Dr. Len Langevin, who for a long time that was her love and her passion and focus of her research, and we're all delighted that she has now been tapped as of last fall. She is the new director of the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, a new name for NCAN, the center at NIH that funds research in all of these exciting emerging areas. And for the first time, Dr. Langevin represents someone who has come from the CAM, the Integrative Medicine Research area. So we're very excited about that. Our predecessors have been people who have some level of interest in CAM, but have had their research career in a more conventional biomedical area.
So, if you were pressed, what would you say? What composes the meridians?
Well, her research suggests that the connective tissue channels, if you like, may be what the meridians are. The interfaces between the tissue is where the connective tissue lines run, and there's some evidence that they may link up. But this work is very preliminary and needs to be done in a very systematic way, where meridian after meridian and connective tissue plane after connective tissue plane needs to be mapped and determined whether there is a correlation, how strong that correlation is.
Acupuncturists don't work with chakras really, but do you have any sense of the electromagnetic or whatever components that are these energy centers we call the chakras?
Well, my interest is not right away jumping to try to find correlates with the chakras or even the meridians. My interest is actually comes from before, who were the people that influenced me early on, and all the Huxley's writings had a very strong influence on me. And in one of his essays, he was talking about it was written in the 1950s. So brain functions and areas of the brain were just beginning to be mapped, and he made the analogy about how the collectors of species had to precede the zoologists. And that's where we are. I prefer to look at living systems and see where these biofields are. So I've kiddingly talked with Jim Oshman about this, and he says we're not really ready yet for a big bee biofield, but we need to map as many of these little bee biofields as we can. So many of the ways that the body functions, in addition to what we all grew up with, what Beverly Rubin calls life is chemistry, there's a whole area of people interested in mapping electromagnetic functions in the body, and obviously the example people always use are the EEG and the ECG of the heart. These are electrical and even magnetic. The MEG and the MCG, the SQUID, are amazing new medical imaging that is showing that electromagnetic regulatory mechanisms function in the body every bit as much as chemical mechanisms do, regulatory mechanisms. And the exciting thing for me is not to rush to see what an aura is or what the equivalent of chakras are, but to slowly act as collectors of species and see how many of these little d biofields we can begin to identify. There's some fascinating research being done to suggest that tiny particles of light, biophotons, are not simply epiphenomena, are not metabolic byproducts of giving off of light, but actually may have very specific signaling powers between cells and between tissues. So there are many of these little small b biofields that we're beginning to collect and eventually together and map what the body looks like. And I'm going to be a renegade also, since I'm a carcinogenic biochemist, as we said, and I'm looking forward to the time when we're going to see not just tissues and cells and electromagnetic processing, but we're going to see molecules as electromagnetic, as vibratory entities, that a hormone is going to find its receptor not simply by a trial and error system of that takes it through the circulation by diffusion or even Brownian motion, but we're going to be able to identify electromagnetic signatures, frequency signatures of a molecule that's going to allow it to home in on its receptor. And it's going to be a whole new way. People are saying, so many physiologists and endocrinologists are saying that the hormone receptor mechanism happens much too quickly and specifically to be described as happening by diffusion and Brownian motion. And so there's an exciting new way on the horizon that's emerging of looking at the body in terms of a kind of biofield physiology, so that first we want to map these biofield phenomena as a separate series of entities from biochemistry, but eventually even the biochemical mechanisms will be reframed within a biofield perspective.
Before we go into the biofield in more detail, for some people, having children is one of the hardest experiences in their life. It really is disruptive for the adult relationship. I wonder, what about you? When have been personal difficult times and how you coped?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think my daughter would not mind at this stage, since we've known each other. I've known each other more than half of life, if I went public with this. But I haven't had any children through marriage, but I had what we used to call a love child in graduate school, and it took me 3 years in the era before the internet helped so many people, children find their biological parents, parents find their children. So it took me over 3 years, and I found my daughter, and we've had just the most wonderful relationship. We lived just across the street from each other for 15 years, and now we both still live in Portland. But that experience of that struggle, and knowing ever since we gave her up for adoption back in my graduate school days, knowing that I wanted to find her and keeping that with me all of those years, and then going through many challenges in those days. You still didn't know who is going to help you and who is going to close the door in your face. And it was just an amazing, for me, journey into finding my daughter and being reunited with her, and now having grandchildren in the Portland area who are no longer children but who are adults themselves, and helping them find their path in life has been one of the richest and most rewarding aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for asking me about that.
For some people, meditation helps them through difficult times, and a lot of people I've interviewed are meditators. What about you?
Interesting question. I've started on the meditative path several times, and it really hasn't taken, but I've always loved Tai Chi for its aspect of meditation and movement. I think both the meditative aspect of Tai Chi after you have stopped the rote kind of step-by-step learning of the flow of Tai Chi, and you can just get in the flow, it gets me into just a wonderful state. And I've always loved that aspect of movement. It's why I've been drawn to Tai Chi rather than yoga, for example, in terms of balance. So yoga is wonderful for a tree pose, but it's balance that's more static, where again, I think it's so important as we age to be practicing balance in movement, and that's what Tai Chi does for us. So that's what I have to say. I was just in Boston recently, and my longest term friend took me to the one of the meditative centers there to try to get me interested. And again, I just have to say it just doesn't speak to me in the way that Tai Chi does.
Right. I can identify that. It's hard to sit. It's for a Gemini. It's very hard. So when we're talking about the whole biofield, every little cell has a biofield, right? So what is the biofield exactly?
Well, the biofield is not, when in traditional ways, when you think of a drug interacting with its receptor, it's a very up close and personal kind of interaction, so that any kind of ionic bonds or covalent bonds or even much weaker bonds are still very susceptible to modeling. This is what people love to do. Drug companies love to model to get an even better fit to a receptor to try to reduce the side effects. But a biofield, by definition, is a larger area of physiological influence, if you like. So it's not restricted to just that carbon or how the methyl group on the drug fits into its corresponding area on the receptor. It's a much larger area, and it's more like the work that's been done on pheromones, how, especially with animals or even sea creatures, release substances that are reproductive attractants, for example, or ants leave pheromones. So this is a kind of chemical way in which signaling occurs, but signaling can occur in a non chemical manner in the same way that that two cells, two groups of cells, each coming from the same source, but put it into adjacent petri dishes, so there's no physical contact between the fluid bathing one cell and another, so it can't happen by chemical signals. There are many ways now in which you can perturb one set of cells in a tissue culture plate and see very specific responses in the other cell. There are also amazing studies coming out of Italy where you can take nerve cells, put them in several dishes, but put the cells on a grid so that you can stimulate one set of nerve cells electrically, and you find that you can record responses in the other from the other set cells in the petri dish, even though there's been no physical contact between the sets of nerve cells. So there are many ways in which we call these non-local effects biofield, and as soon as we use that term non-local, then the question is how non-local is non-local? How large is spread? Larizati called the term non-local mind, and that gets us into the whole fascinating conversation of non-local mind and consciousness, and how much bigger a biofield could be asked to be in contact with than the kind of biofield that people who believe that consciousness is the ground substance of the universe, how a biofield could be asked to be in contact with than this all-pervading consciousness.
Well, does quantum entanglement and quantum non-locality, where entangled particles influence each other, could that apply to the cells responding to changes as well?
Oh, it's funny. We're at a stage of quantum this and quantum that. Several decades ago, it was the Tao of physics, the Tao of cooking, and the Tao of breathing, and now it's quantum this and quantum yoga. I mean, I don't mean to knock it, but there's a lot of loose use of this language, and again, from my perspective, I'm fascinated with a very new field called quantum biology, and this is using the term quantum in a very specific way, and we already have two poster children, if you like, for quantum mechanisms actually explaining very specific fundamental aspects of biology, and I'm talking about photosynthesis and migration of some types of birds, where quantum phenomena are at the heart of the initial events in both of these areas. But I'm struck, I just recently came across within the last 6 months of a wonderful paperback that's an introduction to quantum biology called Life at the Edge. And the two authors bend over backwards again and again. I counted half a dozen times to distance themselves from any possible application of quantum mechanics and quantum biology to psychic phenomena or to psi phenomena. They were very specific in their not wanting to be painted by that brush. And I'm just puzzled by people who are so open in certain ways to new ideas and emerging concepts are so closed, so adamantly closed. I mean, again, I was fascinated by the book The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, the wonderful science writer. And there again, he was so adamant in saying that, for example, the genetics of twins had nothing to do with any of the psychic phenomena that twins often reported to be linked by. And so I'm fascinated, as we all are in the area, by the experiments underway by Dean Radin to try to identify what he calls psi genes, looking at the real geniuses among us, of which I certainly don't count myself, but the people who have extraordinary psychic abilities, and to see is there any set of genes that set them apart from us, and to try to make that link. So
Has he found any genes like that?
my understanding is that as we speak, all of the genetic material has been collected from these extraordinary folks, and the analysis are being done. But I don't believe that there is the announcement yet of the results. But for sure, we should stay tuned to that exciting line of research that Dean is doing from his first at the
So Candace Pert, in her book about cells, said that there are thousands of cell receptors, and the ligand, like from a virus or from a hormone, goes into the cell receptor influenced by your emotional state. So if you're depressed, you're more likely to get a flu ligand, and if you're in love, you're not going to get it. You'll get something else. Is that an accurate description of how the information works or not?
So again, her book is a wonderful landmark, and again, she was way ahead of her time in talking about the molecules of emotion. But it's the same problem we have that's often described in consciousness studies as the hard problem. We don't know how to make the link between these ever-increasing intricate arrays of hormones and peptides in the body, these ligands, as you said, and their receptors. How do we make that link between the description at the biochemical, physiological level and at the subjective level? And that's the same problem that's defined in the area of the field of consciousness. That the hard problem is we don't know how to make that connection, that strong correlation between our ever-increasing ability to map functional MRI correlates of brain states and nerve networks. We're not just looking at particular areas. We could simultaneously get functional MRI reporting from many different areas. So we're looking at webs of nerve cells firing patterns. But we still are totally unable to say how does that relate to our sensation of color, of blueness. And that's what's called this, as you know, when everybody talked about this, what got defined as the hard problem in consciousness. And we could apply that same logic to Candace Pert's ideas of the molecules. Wonderful to make these correlations, but positive, we really don't.
So what are some possible explanations of why, if we perturb the cells in this little petri dish, the cells that are not perturbed in this petri dish also respond? What are some possible explanations besides quantum entanglement?
We can do some very basic physiological studies. We can put either plain a piece of glass between the two plastic dishes, or we can put something that will block ultraviolet light, or something that will block visible light and not ultraviolet light, and we can see if that has any detrimental effect on the ability of the cells of the two different petri dishes to communicate. So we can, by these kind of approaches, we're beginning to suggest that the cells are communicating by light, by the release of biophotons. One example how they communicate, and biophotons can communicate over fairly large distances. I mean, certainly larger distances than are required for a chemical to interact with its receptor.
So what are the implications for something like fighting cancer or diabetes? If we understood the biofield better and the biophotons, would that have application to fighting disease?
I like to think, and this is, we're getting well into the weeds of speculation, which is a place that Kevin and I will be. But the question really is, how do we speculate about this, and how do we come up with ideas? How do we see into the future? As we said, how do we start creating a new kind of biology that will allow us to see increasingly early stages of imbalances that we can correct before they get to be biomedical science. And that is the key. That's the hope, that just as we are able to look at heart rate variability and see how those variations, and as we come to a more regular heartbeat and understand that that's a sign of increasing ill health, that the more variable we are, the more healthy we are. I think we're going to be able to use other biofield measures to get an array of these early detection systems that will revolutionize and will certainly change our whole approach to defining and assessing health.
There's devices. I'm going to interview Beverly Rubik, and she has something that measures the fingertips, the light emission from the fingertips.
Yes.
And what are the names of those devices?
Well, Beverly will describe these devices better than I, but what she's using is a more contemporary, a more modern, up-to-date, newer version of Kirlian photography, where the fingers, her device, I believe, is called a Biowell, in which successive fingers are placed in. And in Chinese medicine, the meridians, for example, either end or begin at the corner of each of our nail beds. And since there are 12 meridians and only 10 fingers, what they find is that several of the fingers have more than one meridian that begins or ends, so that the fingertips, and as well as the nail beds of our toes, that where meridians either start or end.
Well,
so,
the central and the governing meridians don't go through the fingers.
Yes, but there are a lot of extra meridians besides those that.
Do you mean?
But I would like to leave these explanations to Beverly when you talk to her. She'll be able to explain this much better than I. We had some recent experiences with our group, the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, where we visited several ashrams in southern India and were able to use this kind of device, the Biowell, as one of the several devices to study people in different meditative states before and after the changes. And Beverly, as you know, also is developing a fascinating forefront biophysicist who is also looking at ways in which off the body we might be able to detect the emotional state in some other type of biofield. So be sure to ask her about that.
Well, you've probably seen aura photographs where they have just charts of this is an angry person, red, or this is a jealous person, green, or this is a sick aura, gray, black. So, I mean, you can photograph and see the emotional states according to people who do these photographs.
Yes, I would just say that these are baby steps in terms of what we're going to learn about physiological correlates of the emotions. And this is, rather than just measuring chemicals, we'll be able to see these more dynamic fluid changes in emotional states. And for good and for bad, once you can measure them, then people are going to want to develop devices that can change them and rebalance them. And we don't want to get into all of
Well, the neat thing is we have these devices that we're born with that can change it.
It's a wonderful device, yes.
You say that science doesn't have an explanation for healers who don't touch the body, and that we need an energy physiology model of the physiological effects. We need to change the way we talk about biochemistry molecules, not showing them in textbooks as sticks and balls, but that they're fluid and energetic. So you're talking about a whole new level of science to look at the body.
I'm among those people. Certainly, I hope you'll get a chance to talk to Bruce Lipton. I'm among those who believe that our whole biology needs to be revived. I mean, there's a wonderful book that's now over 20 years old, way ahead of its time, where the Willis Harman, who was then the president of IONS, had a conversation with a woman biologist, futurist, Elizabeth Sartoris, her name was, and they published a book called Biology Revision. And I highly recommend it as a jumping off point because it was as I said, several decades old now, but we really do need to consider that so many of our metaphors, if you like, come from the Industrial Revolution, as you alluded to the previous talk that I gave. We have to stop depicting molecules in textbooks as these sticks and balls, because that's what that whole mechanical view that came from the Industrial Revolution still pervades so much of our thinking, instead of looking at molecules as vibrating entities. As I said, that I believe once we think of them in that manner, we're going to then make the next logical step to understanding vibrational fingerprints of molecules.
It's interesting that we're, what is it, 98, 99% empty?
Yes.
So that
but we're 1% full. And how that fullness interacts and stays together is amazing.
it is amazing. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
So
how that 1% interacts and all the ways in which we are able to see it and describe it. So yes, we're mostly empty, but we are amazingly full in ways that we have to be done to.
But that means that the electrons in the molecules are mostly space. They're not
Yes.
they're not little balls of
Yes.
things.
That's right, and that gives us the ability to think of biofields as space-filling entities. And as we said, biofields can be very tiny, and they can be increasingly large. They can have very simple function. They can have very complex informational carrying systems. And if we think of Larry Dossey's non-local mind and several people's concept of panpsychism, where thinking of Ernst Maslow and Jim Carradine, who have wonderful concepts of consciousness as being the ground substance. The first place that I came across that concept was in this dialogue book, The Biology Revision by Willis Harman and Chakras, with that idea. And it's so appealing, although I have to quickly say that there's as much, and really what I mean by as much is as little, evidence that consciousness arises from a complexity of the nervous system that comes from. That when you, in terms of evolutionary terms, when the brain and the nervous system reach a certain level of complexity, that consciousness somehow arose. So there's as little evidence as that as the opposite end of the spectrum that are telling us in wonderful prose and poetry that consciousness is the ground substance of the universe and that matter arose from consciousness. So I'm standing back and asking for evidence. And evidence can be in small baby steps, but we have to get past to the point where we're just discussing or even arguing one side or the other of the conventional view of consciousness arising from matter and the forefront view of matter arising.
So, does consciousness equal awareness, information? In a nutshell, how would you define that all-important word?
So we talked before about intuition, and I thought of when you come to grips with intuition, there's two ways of talking about it. I mean, one is simply we've stored up so much information, or we have access to so much information, that when we get a novel experience, we can card sort so quickly that we seem to have an intuitive understanding of what's going to happen next or what an idea is. And it's just because we've got bits and pieces that we can put together really quickly. So that's one kind of intuition. A very different kind of intuition seems to be a direct way of knowing that's not based in knowing specific bits of information.
Cues.
But they can have it across, that I can know something about an event across the room or across the continent or what. So getting back to I think we have two ways of thinking about consciousness, and the more mundane, prosaic, acceptable way of talking about consciousness is equating it with awareness. And ironically, some of the most interesting studies of the physiology of consciousness is through anesthesia. And what does it mean to, quote, lose consciousness? To lose being aware in that sense. But the other way of talking about consciousness is this much more abstruse, abstract, diffuse way that consciousness, what does it mean? It's really hard for me to get my head around what it even means that consciousness is the ground substance. Beautiful, appealing concept, but again, the closest that comes is reading Judith Urban and Jürgen Maslow's books, but even then, and Deepak Chopra has a recent book where he's coming through with how do we talk about and explain what this other understands consciousness about.
When your research is kind of focused lately on healers who have an effect who don't touch, and
Yes.
and they work on the biofield, I guess you could say. So we're talking about Reiki, external Qigong, Jo-Ray, healing touch. What led you to believe that they do have efficacy? What's the proof?
There have been, as difficult as it has been to design, for example, with Reiki or healing touch, a kind of acceptable, standardized, randomized controlled trial where you have to have some kind of sham Reiki or mock healing touch. There have been quite a number of people, largely, I must say, and give them credit in the nursing community, who have done standard randomized controlled trials. And there have been a lot of reviews, what we call systematic reviews of all of these trials, to see is there a net positive effect. But all of these, so what we call them now biofield therapies, they, in clinical practice, when you go for a healing touch or a Reiki treatment, it partly involves physical touch to the body of the healer, but also off the body. And all the reviews of these kinds of therapies have lumped the two kinds of protocols together. And that's fine, because we're asking the question, is there evidence that in clinical trials that, as close as possible, reproduce clinical, what happens when you go for a clinical treatment, when you go for a session of Reiki. That's so important, is to have it look exactly like what you're getting. That what we need are more trials that only look non-physical touch way of administering, because we have several ways of beginning to understand how you could get clinical benefit from light touch, from massage. There are oxytocin and other hormones that are released by light touch. There are specific sensory receptors that respond to light touch, pleasant touch. But we don't, as you have implied in several of your questions to me, we still don't have any explanation for how you can get clinical benefit, how you can get full healing without physically touching the body. So I assembled a team of us, and we went through what we found were 90 randomized controlled trials of all of these biofield therapies. And what we found was, I believe the number was 28 of them, for one reason or another, only used non-physical touch. Studies of burn patients where you didn't want to use physical touch. Studies of neonates where you didn't want to use physical touch. And of these, we applied various sets of criteria as to methodological rigor or how well they were reported, so we could decide whether they were, we could really understand what the results were. And to make a long story short, we found 12 of these 28 trials had at least one of the outcome measures that they were looking at had statistically positive significance. So that we feel that there is preliminary evidence for non-physical touch forms of biofield therapy. The problem is that it's very difficult to get funded to do these kind of studies, and so what almost all of these studies are small numbers of subjects, preliminary studies, what we call pilot studies. And we really need, as we try to understand more and more what biofields are and their potential for healing, not necessarily as an alternative to more standardized forms of healing, but often in addition to. There's been studies where Reiki has been allowed in the operating theater so that patients who've gotten Reiki during the operation experience less peri-operational bleeding and fewer days in post-op recovery. So there are bits and pieces of very exciting work in which biofield therapies can be used as complementary treatments to conventional biomedical.
Dr. Shamani, Jane found that those kind of methodologies reduce pain in breast cancer patients, post-breast cancer treatments, like surgery and chemo.
Yes, and as you may know, I work closely with Dr. Jane Shamani in the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. A funny story of how we met, and just tell you briefly, there was every 2 years there's a very large meeting, international meeting of researchers to present their findings on complementary and integrative health. And one year the meeting was in Portland, and I thought it might be time to see if they were willing to have a symposium on biofield, the whole biofield perspective. And much to my surprise, the organizers wrote back to me and said, yes, we would like to do this, but somebody else has submitted a very similar proposal. And if you work with that person, and we'll give the two of you one session, and that other person was Shaman Jane, and that's how we met. And we got so much interest in our session that we decided that we would try to form this small new entity. And we call ourselves a collaborative accelerator because we don't want to get big to compete with IONS or the Chakras Foundation or other large scale. We want to be lean and mean and fluid and flexible. And like the first thing we did was bring together people from academia and from other research organizations to look at the concept of the biofield. And this wound up with our writing approximately 12 white papers, different perspectives of the biofield from all different perspectives, from the perspective of Eastern religions right up to the perspective of physics, including biofield devices and clinical trials and trials with animals and cell cultures. And those 12 papers were published in a special issue of the journal Global Advances in Health and Medicine, and they're available through either PubMed or if you go to the CHI website, which is www.chi.is, you can get access to those articles.
What year was the paper that you two presented in Portland?
I believe that the meeting was in 2012, and we wrote up our session, so it actually got published. So the introduction to the whole concept of biofield was written up as a kind of conversation between the people who participated in that session, and that paper is published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine. You can find it with me as the first author there, or just email me and I'll send you reference.
And then what year was CHI founded?
She was founded in 2014, and at the end of that year is when we had our biofield workshop, and 2015 was when those 12 papers were published in Global Advances.
And what else have you done since 2015?
Well, I'm formally retired, so I don't have my own lab anymore. But you might ask, I think one of your guiding questions to me, or for all of the people you're interviewing, is what do you do for fun? And now that I'm retired, my idea of retirement is, if you're lucky as I was, that you get to drop away from all the parts of your quote work that drain you, and you can focus your energy on the parts that fed you. And that's what I'm doing. So I don't try not to use the word work anymore. And as much as possible, everything I'm doing is in the area of fun that feeds my curiosity and interest. So, having said that, one of the things we are studying is a type of healing that is that uses tuning forks. A woman named Eileen McCusick, who has a practice in Vermont, came to CHI and asked us to help her develop a device for that she could tune this device to a particular frequency, and she wouldn't have to continually activate the tuning fork, because this device would keep that frequency going for a long time. The device would also be able to record the sound, and in particular the perturbations that occurred when she combed the field, which is in her study called Biofield tuning. That is what she called it. They find, she and many people now that she's trained, and the literally thousands of clients that she's treated in her practice, what they find is that there are areas that exist outside of our body in which health-related information, physiologically important information, emotionally important information from past traumas, so that our important aspects of our health history is stored outside our body in a way that's accessible. And one way that it's accessible is through combing these fields with a tuning fork, an activated tuning fork, and listening for where the perturbations in the sound, or listening for where other types of information can be gleaned by these trained practitioners. So what we've set up to do is to help her do some very basic clinical studies to give her a research base. For example, simply a study to see if several practitioners can find these perturbations at the same sites of the body. That's one of the most basic things one would start to do with any kind of intervention. There will be inter-rater agreement.
Barbara Brennan talks about the different layers of the aura, and in some of her books she shows what it looks like when there's those clusters of unresolved material. So she has really nice diagrams, but it sounds like the tuning fork would act, say, on the first layer of the aura where there's junk in the energy field.
I mean, all of these are all of these people are helping me to collect species before we can form a zoology. To get back to that wonderful book from Huxley. So I believe, whether it's true or not, or I believe all of these types of biofield therapies are cousins that that Reiki, external Qigong, therapeutic touch, healing touch, and many idiosyncratic methods that individual healers use, that all of these are somehow related, just as we will someday understand all of the different diagrams from Buddhist practice, from hands of touch practices, where the different levels of the auras, what the shamans detect. So again, these layers around the body are going to be related somehow, and we're going to, I don't know if you or I are going to live to see it, but we're going to be starting to develop that zoology, which is going to be so exciting. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a biofield sociology even, where understanding how the idea that these biofields extend beyond our physical body, what I often describe, my mantra is, I don't end here. And if people can really understand that from a biofield sociology perspective, how is that going to change how we interact with each other?
You said, I don't what?
I don't end here. Put your hand on your arm and really grok that. Understand that I don't. This is not the way. One of my other and many of our heroes from my generation was Alan Watts, and I remember him. The one time I heard him speak, he was gathering information for his book on psychotherapy East and West, and he was talking about one of the saddest things about how we grow up and we grow our children is with the sense that the function of the body is to carry me around. So that he called it the chauffeur theory of existence. So that the body is carrying me around, and therefore whatever me is, it's within these physical walls. And it makes for separateness and isolation, and he believed that aloneness could lead to neurosis and psychosis.
Got it. You also mentioned that Martin Blank at Columbia said low frequency electromagnetic can change gene selection. So that's another aspect of sound, right? Acoustics.
It is of the idea that it's all frequencies, and this is work that needs very much. There are a lot of kinds of research that, in his case, the funding dried up and he wasn't able to pursue it. Mm-hmm. But very, very briefly, we know that certain types of hormones, their receptors are not on the surface of cells, those are the peptide hormones, but the steroid hormones, their receptors are right at the level of the DNA. And from Martin Black's work, when he was in the biology department at Columbia, he was finding that there might be electromagnetic response elements or electromagnetic receptors on the DNA, such that they would respond to certain frequencies, and certain genes could be up or down regulated in response to electromagnetic signaling in the same way that certain genes are known to be up or down regulated in response to hormones. And through the wonders of molecular biology, you can identify what that region of the DNA you think it is, and you can snip it off and anneal it or attach it to a region of the DNA that's upstream from a gene that didn't seem to respond initially to that electromagnetic challenge or frequency. And now when you use that same affect the cells with that same frequency of electromagnetic radiation, the new genes will turn on that you artificially attach the electromagnetic response elements.
People are interested in epigenetics, changing the genes. And what I don't understand is how, if we change which genes express, that can be passed on to your children.
I'm gonna punt on this question and strongly recommend that you. I don't think I saw Bruce Lipton's name on your.
I've tried. I haven't heard from him.
Okay, well, he is one of the best people to. I don't want to say popularize because that has a kind of negative context, but to explain the principles of epigenetics to a wide audience. He and Dawson Church that would be another really excellent person.
In terms of your particular research, you're most interested in creating this new physiology of the biofield. That's really broad. How are you narrowing that down?
I'm narrowing it down to come back to that metaphor again by combing the literature, looking for our hints, looking for our new species. I'm looking for ways in which we need to revise how we think of biology, how we think of ourselves as living systems. And the biofield is certainly a major one that we need a kind of vibrational medicine, an electromagnetic, and who knows what other kinds of quantum phenomena will be shown to be part of living systems.
I do clairvoyant sessions with people, and I can do a session with someone in another state that I've never met, don't know anything about, and be really accurate reading their chakras. That's kind of what I use to get into their issues. So is it possible that biofields could extend, from a distance, that I'm somehow tapping into their biofield?
Well, biofield is a word, it's a concept, it's a perspective that we apply to phenomena. So there is no biofield. We're explaining what's happening with what we know about biophysics, with what we know about quantum physics, with what we know about chemistry, but we're using this term biofield to give us not just a new perspective, but maybe an overarching way of systematizing all these phenomena. So more power to you to be able to document what exactly is going on with these clairvoyant sessions. It really is a whole question of, do you believe that memories are stored between our ears in this wonderful mass of flesh called the brain, or is the information out there somewhere, and it's the non-local mind, and the analogy people always use is to a radio or a television that we're receiving. We know that if you didn't know how a television worked and you saw the picture after you put the plug in the wall, you would think the picture come through the wall. And we know that people like me who can still remember the rabbit ear antennas that we used to have on top of our television, so that you had to get the right kind of tuning to be able to receive those signals. So it really has to do with what your personal cosmology is and how you what's the interface of cosmology and physiology that you believe in as to how you can begin to, quote, explain the kinds of phenomena that you are directly experiencing. And so many people, we talked about Dean Radin before, his recent book called Real Magic. It's such a wonderful compilation of the hard evidence and the statistics. He's a solid statistician that so many of these phenomena have been studied in so many types of controlled studies that you just have to believe it. And how do you reach out to these people who hide behind their skepticism, these people who give skepticism a bad name? We all should be skeptics in terms of at what point are we going to believe something is true or not? But we just have to know that the best way to convince someone, I think, is direct experience. And rather than, or in addition to marshaling the data, we have to have a group of people who can develop easily applicable, easily given tests to people and studies that everybody can do. And we need to have this part of these kinds of conferences and have them part people who go to TED Talks, not just talk about these kinds of phenomena, not just marshal the statistics, as good as those approaches are, but we have to develop a series of experiential exercises that are easily given to people. Because are you going to believe your senses or not? I mean, one of the areas that has come down to, that has been taken through the mud by the so-called skeptics is homeopathy. And we don't know, for example, is it valid to simply say that you dilute something to the point where there's no molecules left? Well, how do we know that there's no molecules left, or parts of molecules, or information from the molecules? We know that so many aspects of physics behave one way at the macro level and very different at a micro level. And maybe when you start simply to dilute molecules or substances way beyond what we think is possible to have molecules left, some other kinds of laws are behaving.
Yeah,
so,
people are talking about water has memory. So,
yes. Yeah, I mean, that's just another whole area that none of us can be experts. None of us can have all the research of all of these amazing areas at our fingertips.
Except Dean Radin. He's got a lot.
But the job of people like you is to identify who those people are, so that people like me, then I can go and find exactly where I need to go. It's why I never again wanted to be a physician, because I didn't want to have to memorize all those bits and pieces of stuff. I just wanted to have to know where to go to get it.
Yeah.
You're doing such a wonderful job of bringing all of these amazing people together, so that I know I'll be able to go to this one source to listen to people who have expertise.
And she aims to do that as well, to have a resource base.
Yes. I'll tell you this one last funny story about Chi. Is when we went to develop our website, they told us that the .org as an extension is being coming to the end of its ability to handle everything that it wanted. And so we said, well, what are some of the other extensions that are out there? And when they said .is was one of them, we thought, go no further. We're just going to be Chi.is.
What does it stand for, IS?
I don't even know if it stands for anything.
Maybe it's institution.
It stands for isness. Well,
okay.
I just like that it is isness.
Okay.
And that's good enough for me.
Part of my book is to give people organizations and journals to go to. So you mentioned the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine and Explore, the Journal of Science and Healing. Are there other journals that you think are cutting edge and recommend?
Well, I saw your list, and the challenge here is to come up with a list of journals that are in PubMed or psychology equivalents that are accessible to people. There's, as you probably know, there's a whole list of areas that drives people like me crazy when I'm trying to find studies in hard to find areas. So it's called the gray literature. So there are journals that are not on PubMed. Certainly the icing journal, which has never been on PubMed. There was a journal called Advances. I don't know if they ever got onto PubMed. I'm not even sure Advances is still publishing as such. But there are these journals, and I just would encourage you to find somehow a librarian, an information scientist who is up on that great literature to find out which journals have some level of credibility. Obviously, another journal is help me think of it. I'm blocking on the name of the journal. That's the scientific exploration.
Yeah, it's called Explore.
I'm
I think.
Sure. Explore, or they may have a separate journal in addition, which I think they did in addition to Explore. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Explore is Larry Dossey's.
Is Larry Dossey?
Yeah.
Yes.
Science and that I have that on my list. I do have it. What about organizations? Institute for Integrative Health. You mentioned, of course, Chi, Ions. Who else do you? Is ICEAM doing anything anymore that you know of?
I think ICEAM has reinvented itself. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not positive on that, so I don't know. I'm sure a quick search of the web will tell us that.
Any other organizations that you look to, like for newsletters or journals or something?
I am overwhelmed with the kind of the organization that I look to at this point is my own network of friends and people who alert me to papers, because there's no one journal, there's no 6 journals anymore. The ones you mentioned we follow, but the wonderful thing is at a certain point, people send me an alert, an email of a paper that's been accepted for publication, of a new study that's being done. And so that's my best source right now.
Well, then I assume you put them on your website, and then people can go to your website.
Yes. I had resistance so far, for better or for worse. I'm one of those mavericks who doesn't use social media. I considered at one point writing a book called About Facebook, with its dual meanings, by my desire to do an about face with social media. So I don't have my own website, but we certainly have a wonderful website, Chi, and we have a monthly webinar. We have a bi-weekly newsletter that covers many of these things.
Great. What I'm curious about, just a few more questions, is you've mentioned that people who are doing research are really afraid. Oh, I don't want to be associated with the paranormal, parapsychology side, and that maybe they're just dealing with the fact that they would be misjudged and criticized. But what do you think is the explanation why it's such a scary topic for people?
I don't think it's so scary anymore. I think it's scary for people, and I prefer not to mention names, that there are people I know in mainstream research, in conventional research, who have wonderful funding from NIH and other mainstream sources, who devote a small portion of their research to phenomena on the forefront. And they prefer not to push that aspect for all of the interest they have in phenomena. But because if you look at a number, almost any aspect of conventional research in physiology or neurobiology, if you push it, if you push functional MRI research, you find that there are people beginning to look at correlates of meditation, correlates of consciousness and unconsciousness through anesthesia. So that there are aspects, and inevitably people are going to be drawn. But I think also the people who are doing most of their research and have most of their interest focused on, for lack of a better term, biofield research, for example, have given up and will no longer accept debates with skeptics. Because these are people who are no longer interested in the facts. They don't want to know.
They don't read the literature. They don't even read the studies.
Right. So there's no point in having those kind of debates anymore. And more people I hear from have adopted that position. They simply will not accept those kinds of invitations, whether they're from skeptics or from well-meaning groups who want to present both sides of the issue. So I'm leaning towards that position. I'm much more interested in speaking to an audience who's open but not open enough, and where I can expand their understanding. I can give them more information than they already know about areas they can expand into, or where I can tell them about scientific experiments and explain to them in ways that they haven't been exposed to.
Just last question is a sociological one. As someone who's lived a long time and seen a lot of changes, now we seem to be in a particularly negative, scary time with climate change and autocrats and growing inequality. I wondered if you're optimistic or pessimistic about our future.
I think about this often, and I just am so, when I let myself think about, I don't even like to call it climate change. I think that's the benign term that the right wing has really wanted us to use. We have to call it global warming. We have to call it ocean acidification. We have to name it for what it is. But I recall a quote which I think was attributed to Robert Oppenheimer, who was the director of Los Alamos, and the quote father of the bomb. But he said, if I'm quoting him right, and maybe it's somebody else, but not him. But in any case, the quote is, "It's a good time not to be hopeful, but it's a good time not to give up hope." So I'm stuck in that awkward position right now, where I'm devastated when I really see and read and hear people say of how we've blown it. We've missed our chance to come to grips with these devastating trends in global warming and all of their implications. And part of me totally believes that, and part of me just loves to talk to my grandchildren and to those other generations. They're the ones that are going to be living with the consequences of what we've allowed to happen. And so I don't feel hopeful, and I can't, I mean, as a researcher, it's in your DNA to not to give up hope. I mean, curiosity means there's always the possibility of something around the corner. And I believe fervently in the human species. And if we don't survive, something is going to survive that's going to evolve once again into us or a better us. And so there's that part of me that is at rock bottom hopeful.
What's hopeful to me is you've been reading about Greta Thunberg, who's now 16, the Swedish girl, and she's kind of led this movement that's mushrooming around the world of students striking and saying, we're not going to put up with what you've done to us. That, to me, is hopeful.
Yes, and it's not just students leading walkouts, as I believe there were students in Denver did that fairly recently, but it's the students who are legally challenging the government and the judicial system. I only know about it in this country. They're saying this is a right that you're denying me, a right to have a future.
Yes, some of those kids are in Portland.
It tears me up to when I read about what they are doing. It's more than gun control. It's more than any one aspect that we need to get back that spirit of the '60s and get those kids out there. And I love that we're doing it at so many different levels. So, not to give up.
Yeah. Would if someone wanted to be like you when they're your age, what would you say? Why you're so alive and interested and healthy? What would you give them any advice?
My gosh, what kind of advice? It's just so wonderful to remain curious and work on your balance, work on your physical balance, work on balance of ideas, and work on, here I am, why am I using that word work? I just said I didn't like to use that word work. So I guess that's what I would say is use that idea that it is all fun. Maybe a way to close is many people now on email have pick a quote to use underneath their signature. So I'll just end by telling you what mine is. It's from a man in Columbia, not Columbia University, New York, but Columbia, South America, who Paulo Lugari, and he said, which I love, he said, if you're not dreaming, you must be asleep. So that's what I would like to end with, and to really think about what that means. It's always thinking of new ideas and swim in the interface, because that's where the richness is, that's where the new ideas are born in.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Very illuminating.